we start by perhaps presenting the handicap of the panel, because what you have been promised are 3 panelists, but we have, for the moment, 2, but you have also a moderator, so in the end we are 3, which is not that bad. But let me first introduce the proper panelists. So to my right I have Ilke Toygür. She is an analyst at Elcano Institute of Madrid, a TEPSA member, and also she is an adjunct professor at the University Carlos III in Madrid. Very welcome, Ilke. Ilke is a not particularly migration expert, but she has all the knowledge and information about European Union-Turkey relations, and then you certainly see immediately the connection with migration. That is the EU-Turkey statement, which was concluded in the context of the migration crisis 2015-16. In fact, if I remember correctly, in spring 2016. Then we have Thomas Mühlhans from the Federal Ministry of the Interior, and he is the head of the Department of National, European and International Migration Strategies of the Federal Ministry for the Interior. So that's also promising. So he represents more or less, if I may address you like that, as the representative of the incoming presidency, which is excellent. Now, I also would have liked to introduce to you Professor Christoph Reinprecht of University of Vienna. At least for the moment he didn't show up, but perhaps he might come a bit later, and we will see what will happen then. So to that extent, perhaps I can abuse a little bit my position as a moderator to give a sort of introduction of the problem, because there were several references already over today's, but also yesterday's discussions to the migration problem. Let's not call it a crisis anymore, but it's a problem which is with us and which will stay with us, probably because of the fact that, whether you like it or not, the European continent has the reputation of being a very safe and stable environment where people are looking not only sometimes for protection, but also for better opportunities, to have a better life for themselves and their families. The problem of the migration issue, it's first of all a multi-dimensional problem. So the whole issue starts in the countries of origin. So the big crisis of 2015 obviously has its starting point in the civil war, or civil wars, if you like, in Syria. But at the same time, we were experiencing influx from countries like Afghanistan, Somalia, Pakistan, what have you. The 100,000 over 1 million, we remember that. Remember also all the tragedies in the Mediterranean, the drownings taking place, the smuggling, etc. But the first dimension is the situation, the conflicts, the turmoil, the unrest in the countries of origin. And obviously there have been summit meetings even at European Union levels, African states, with whatever states, to try to stabilize these countries by investing, inviting business to invest and so on. However, these countries have their reputation of being not stable. So also to invite business to invest in an unstable environment, that's not a very promising perspective. The second dimension obviously is connected to our external borders. And here the reference in regard to the crisis 2015-16 is to Dublin and Schengen. We were not able to maintain, enforce the Schengen arrangement, which clearly has as its objective, ambition, to secure our external borders, which was already a rather painful exercise when we created the Frontex agency in Warsaw with a focus to the Eastern European land borders, but obviously situations have become much more complex since we are confronted with the first influx from Syria, for example, because then we have to focus on the relation Turkey, Greece, Northern Africa, Italy, and so forth and so forth. So Schengen was not being, we were not able to keep that framework intact. On the contrary, borders were closed. In the time of Berlusconi, migrants were waved through. There were hundreds of thousands of migrants arriving in Budapest, a country which is now being blamed because of not being open to receive migrants. But they received quite a lot of migrants during the crisis, but they waved them essentially through because in the meantime, Frau Merkel made this famous statement, "Wir schaffen das," and then they said, well, please move forward to upper north Germany. So, and then we have the Dublin arrangement, and those two are connected. Dublin and the Schengen are clearly connected because although if you have a close look to the Dublin regulation as it's still in force, we have set a series of criteria which have to be followed in a hierarchical order. First, you have to mind the interest of minor migrants. Then you have to mind the interest of migrants having a history already in Europe because they have relatives, families already in the European Union. So a Syrian relative who has an uncle in Germany, they should have been relocated to the German authorities for the assessment of his application of environment. The other criteria of Dublin was connected to an early history with regard of a visa which you have already acquired, working, temporary, whatever. Then you were supposed to be removed to that country in question, where it's Finland, family, short-term residence. If there is, however, this obviously, in view of the numbers of migrants which were coming to us, to the European continent, we were not able to maintain this whole system, so it collapsed more or less, which is in a way a pity because it was prepared for a normal situation of a number of migrants arriving, looking for international protection together with the family members, but we were not prepared to handle the hundreds of thousands of migrants coming more or less at the same time. So we have to blame ourselves because I think we could have prevented all this to happen. We were a little bit blind. This morning we discussed, we were taken by the aftermath of the 9/11, but we are also fully occupied to deal with the economic crisis, with the geopolitical problems perhaps, but we didn't have a clear assessment of our immediate neighborhood, and we could have foreseen all these dramas taking place. So that's the other dimension. Then, obviously, we have, once they have arrived at the European continent, we have to provide for what is now called, in the formal terminology, the hotspots. So a first reception kind of facilities where you can receive these people, you can house them on a provisional basis, you can take care for them by food, by clothes, by housing, by eventually education, where we also completely failed. We left, in fact, the burden to the member states in charge of protecting our external borders, which was a bit of a horrendous situation. So the poor Greek, which were already in trouble with regard to their internal economic situation, and later on the Italians, that was a bit a one-sided kind of exercise, which was doomed to fail in my perspective. The other one is, of course, even if you are tempted to dismiss an application for asylum, there were some ideas, well, perhaps we can profit from the influx of migrants to the extent that they can provide us a labor force which is not available on our own labor market. So that is the variant which we are referring at as the legal migration approach. That has been tried out in Germany, in Sweden, to a large extent, rather successfully, up to a certain moment, up to a certain number of migrants. And then the Swedes said, stop, this is enough, not many more. So there are all these variants. The most important, of course, is the situation in the countries of origin, then the protection of our external borders, where we failed and where we tried to do better, then the how to process this whole procedure of assessment of the application for protection. And then certainly there is this other dimension, legal migration. And in the midst of all this is international crime, smuggling and these things, terrorism as well. So I wanted to pick out three other elements perhaps, and one of it is related to the Turkey EU statement, spring 2016, where we came to the conclusion rather fast, in my perspective, that as far, but you are going to explain it much better, but the idea was we were able to return illegal migrants coming from Turkey. Illegal migrants, in which stage of their application, but nevertheless, the reference to illegal migrants being returned to Turkey. But on the other hand, we were obliged to take over legal migrants, so regular migrants, one by one. So that should be potentially quite a number. I think the European Union was always rather happy, content about this arrangement. Even on highest political level, they were tempted to say it's very successful. We have to have an interest to continue it. And obviously, there is also another side of the medal, the payment of 3 billion, and another tranche of 3 billion had to be paid. But that's, of course, a kind of mutual agreement. But there are also downsides to this one settlement. Then there is the relocation issue in view of the big numbers arriving at our external borders, the idea to distribute them in view of the fact that we have not only created the internal market, but a common space. We have abolished our internal borders in principle, Schengen, and then we have to secure the external borders. However, in view of the numbers, we have to distribute them in an honest manner. Well, we all know that we are in that context confronted starting in September 2015 with an internal problem within the Council, where a number of our new member states, more particularly Poland, the Slovaks also, the Czechs and the Hungarians, voted against this system, just the principle of relocation. And the Finns, as we recalled yesterday, they abstained in the vote, but nevertheless, qualified majority was achieved. And there started that problem. I always have the impression relocating migrants is something else than trying to achieve the internal market by securing standards of technical measures of whatsoever. So it's a kind of new domain which we have been entering. So for me also personally, it was not self-evident that a relocation system could be decided upon by qualified majority. However, the Treaty of Lisbon allows to do that. But that is the second point. And the third point, which is also, I think, a rather relevant one, is the non-agreement between the 27 or 28, or how many want to have you, about what is to be considered a safe third country. So it may easily happen these days that the one capital considers Afghanistan, for example, as a safe third country, whereas another member state considers it as not to be qualified as a safe third country. What does that mean? Everybody knows that in view of the Schengen arrangement, the migrant has only one chance. So once his application being dismissed, it's over for the whole territory of the European Union. And then obviously there is some kind of a discrepancy. If you apply in the Netherlands as an Afghan, you might be assisted at least for the short term, or when you address yourselves to the authorities in France, they would simply be tempted to push you back and to return you to your country of origin. These are purely examples. But there is also a huge problem that we are not agreeing about a list of safe third countries. I remember that when the Commission made a first effort to draw up a list, common list of safe third countries, the ambition was purely focusing the Western Balkans, and even there, I'm referring to the early discussion, we didn't agree about Bosnia-Herzegovina or whatever. It was really a drama, isn't it, in this context? So, now that's the state of play. Of course, the Commission in the meantime, of course, they have presented all kinds of proposals, I think very wise ones, by the way, objective ones, how to reorganize relocation to be complemented with a fairness system, criteria. It's always helpful to develop criteria in light of your economic problems, your efforts in the past, and whatever. Population, etc., absorption capacities, rather wise approach, but so far, as I know, no result at all. Whereas we have at the end of this month, the famous Tusk leaders' agenda, we have the whole complex of all the problems, but including migration on the agenda, and the ambition is to get a breakthrough there. Let's see what the perspectives are. And after that, because we are already hinting at the Austrian presidency, I think there will be a special summit for migration organized in September, but that's something which you perhaps could give some light on. And that's about the procedures. So that is a kind of introduction also because I wanted to give that responsibility to the third panelist, but he happened not to show up, at least not for the moment. So perhaps then, I think in light of your background and expertise, I would like to give Ilke then first the floor in that context. So I tried deliberately to prepare a little to pave the way for that discussion, that you give your impressions on the success or disadvantage of the EU-Turkey arrangement. And then we are already able to turn to our colleague from the Federal Ministry of the Interior. What is the immediate future of this very important but very complicated file? Ilke, both of them have prepared for us a PowerPoint. However, they also have agreed to limit themselves as much as possible. Well, I've given probably a very bad example in that respect. Ilke, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And I would like to take 1 minute to state that Vienna is the city I have spent my Erasmus semester. So it's lovely to be here. This is the first time I'm here as a speaker. And I would like to thank both TEPSA and local organizers for inviting us here today. As it's already stated, I'm not an expert on migration policy at all, but I got the chance to follow Turkey-EU statement in my time in Sabancı University, Istanbul. Basically, when all these happened, I was in Turkey, so I was following Turkey-EU relations, and at the same time, the developments in Turkey-EU relations connected so much to Turkey-EU statement because of the urgency of the issue, basically. So my intention here is that to go through this topic for a while and state my position on Turkey-EU statement. You will see me in any other topic related to European Union, very pro-European Union, but in this issue, very critical of the European Union, and in any other issue, very critical of the Turkish government, and in this issue, very in favor of the efforts that have been happening in Turkey. So with this brief introduction, I have a couple of slides, but basically my idea is to introduce the topic without the slides, but I brought you the certain figures published by the European Commission on Turkey-EU statement. The idea, I think we should start with the distinction of migrants and refugees, because I think they are used interchangeably, and when we are talking about it, we are a bit confused, because migration, that you choose to move to another country for education, for family ties, etc., is one thing. But being a refugee and have to leave your country is another thing. So I think maybe we should first put these concepts in their places. In the MENA region, starting with Syria, the link basically between the state and the citizen is broken, and the monopoly over force is gone. So there have been so many issues throughout the years, and the point I would like to underline is that it's not going to stop very soon. But I would like to connect this to another question I have. Why all issues related to migration and refugees are turning into crisis? Why they are becoming crisis? No? Because I think that the starting point is the concept of nation state, and perceiving a part of the territory, a piece of land, as a natural right for your nation only. I wanted to start with a bit philosophical discussion of this topic and the concept, because now we have them like in the crisis status as a problem, we call it a problem, and we try to approach that way, while it's not always leading us to a solution in that regard. And of course, the inequalities in societies and unfair globalization didn't help, so that the citizens in European countries, for example, they feel very much threatened. But one of the other things that will also connect my intervention to Turkey is that how do we frame newcomers? Now, how do we frame people that are coming to our countries. Because when you think about the Turkish example, Turkey is not a country known for its pluralism, multiculturalism, and all these like values in favor of newcomers, no? And then how do you manage to have almost 4 million people in a country with, when we compare to European societies, with a kind of fairly positive public opinion? This goes very much through framing. Because basically, in the example of Turkey, this is why I said, like, in any other talk, I would be very critical. In this one, I'm kind of in favor. They have been framed like both as responsibility of Turkish Republic and an opportunity. This is, as I said, this can be connected very much to other issues. But the framing is very, very important. So this can connect us maybe how it was framed in Europe, and we can go to the Turkey EU statement. Thinking that you already know very much about Turkey EU statement, I'm not going to go into the details, but maybe talk about the second year in itself. But the idea here is that, for example, in the beginning we had Germany also perceiving the refugees as responsibility, but we had, for example, the Hungarian government perceiving themselves as the guardians of Christianity. So basically, where do we look from to the refugee issue is always affecting what we are thinking. Here I wrote some of the data we have. This is the UNHCR data from October 2017. It's certainly changing very quickly, but it shows that, first of all, Turkey is the biggest hoster of any refugee community in the world, and it has over 3.5 million refugees. The problem is more than 90% of refugees in Turkey live outside of the camps, and they are not given as legal refugee status. It's very important to underline that, because we call them refugees in Turkey, but they are not called refugees legally, but they are guests. So as we can see, the biggest share of this population is 3.2 million with Syrians, but then we have Afghans, Iraqis, Iranians, Somalis, etc. So this is the UNHCR data. This is the Commission report on the second year of Turkey EU statement. And basically what is underlined here is the great success, and because of the drop arrivals in sea border. So the main point in favor, this looks like a very positive data, and it is certainly a positive data, but I'm not so sure, this is definitely open to discussion, and I'm looking forward to discuss it with you, that if the reason behind the dropout is really the statement. Or is it the closure of the Balkan route, or is it the bad experience that they have been having in the agency, in the reception centers in Greece? With all due respect, by the way, if Turkey got the burden of refugees in the arrival, Greece is the member state who has been trying way beyond its capacity to handle this situation. So claiming that the EU-Turkey statement is the only reason for this dropout is misleading, in my opinion. As I said, we can also discuss this further. So this is the contribution of the European Union to Turkey to deal with this problem. It's, as you know, 3 + 3 billion. This is one of the biggest complaints of the Turkish government, as long as whenever they are in Brussels, they are like, you promised 3 billion, you don't even send the money, what is it going on here? But the idea here is that basically what the European Union is contributing, even if it's a contribution, it's very minor compared to the process to take care of all these refugees. But since they are not necessarily living in camps, they are basically looking for their lives. So they are trying, like, maybe sharing some personal anecdotes related to this could be good idea for the rest of the discussion. So this is what we have about the final fact sheet from the European Commission for the registration rates and reception capacity, etc., etc. This is also very much connected to Greece, what we have in Greece, and what we have discussed yesterday about coast guards and the strengthening of coast guards and recruitment of coast guards, connecting this issue to the security issue. But what I would like to do, if I have 5 more minutes, is that untie the refugee issue with the security issue. Because definitely I can see the point that the refugees are Muslims, terrorists are mostly Muslims. And there's a tendency to mix xenophobia together with Islamophobia. But I certainly think the establishment of this link between refugees and terrorism, or refugees and border control, is not helping us to deal with the problem as we should have. Because it has a humanitarian side, and of course it's a security side. This is very realistic. If we don't think about it, we would be naive here. But I certainly think we should find a way to untie these two dimensions. What is also problematic in this regard, that if we continue to tie refugees to terrorism, this opens the discourse to populist political parties, or what we call non-mainstream political parties. Because this play very much in hands of nativists, nationalists. I know there are different categories regarding political parties here, but when we have this connected, we have basically this link to populism, which brings us to a problematic point. So what do we need for the future? It's just to finish my part with a positive note. We need policies. This is the time that the European Union sit down and basically stop externalizing the issue, because I would never, if we go back to the safe third country discussion, I would never trust in Turkey fully to keep all the time the refugees out of European territory. This is the time that the European Union should get its responsibility and start to go for a migration policy of itself, which shouldn't basically base on the externalities and third country collaboration. And the second thing is, maybe we should also, not that, I'm not so sure if it's the best way, but positive campaign about the arrival of refugees is a good thing because of the demographics of Europe. Maybe we can frame it in a different way that, hey, these people will help to pay our pensions in the future. Maybe it will, again, going back to the framing issue, maybe it could help in the discussion. And basically, as one final remark, if Europe does not want further refugees in its territory, it's time for a proactive foreign policy. Because if we don't solve the root causes of the issues in the refugee-sending countries, if we can't at least help them solve these problems through proactive foreign policy, there will be many other crises in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So to that extent, all the topics of this wonderful conference are connected to each other clearly. Yeah. That's very nice. By the way, listening to you, I was also looking in the audience, and of course, we can still profit from the presence of you, Bernd, the Deputy Executive Director of Frontex. So I kindly invite you, Bernd, to come in, if you like, because as an alternative of our Austrian colleague who didn't show up, you're utmost welcome to give your input. But let's first address then the representative of the Austrian presidency. I mean, it's a multitude of aspects, dimensions. You were kindly provocative with regard to the European Union trying to externalize its problems to third countries. It's an intriguing issue. It's hinting at the first dimension of the problem as I've introduced it. But let's first pave the way for you to see how you can make a contribution. Let's hope you can solve the problem, but at least try to make a contribution in providing the European Union to have a proper European asylum migration policy.
So thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the introduction. And there are a lot of interesting things and important things already said here on the panel. In my position as member of the Austrian Ministry of Interior, I will talk here a little bit about the challenges in the migration issues, and also, of course, of our ideas and plans in the next months, and then also in the middle and long-term perspective, because I think not everything can be solved in a very short term. And I think we have, as a strategist in this way, it's important to have this middle and long-term perspective too. When we talk about migration, I just want to start with some general things. We normally talk about legal migration, asylum, and irregular migration, and all these three things belong in each way together. And of course, these things are often mixed up in discussion. Yeah? So we don't only have mixed migration flows. Perhaps we have also mixed migration discussions in this way. And because of all the happenings from 2015, yeah, the issue of legal migration is in the background right now. So the thing about irregular migration and asylum migration is the highest priority now in the political discussions over Europe. And on this point, I just want to, thank you, come back to the 2015 situation, and then want to add that this situation doesn't matter if we have overseen something or not. This situation brought Europe, in our point of view and in my personal point of view, on a point where it's been very critical for the European Union and also for some member states. This situation has effects for the national states and the political discussion, and it also has effects on the dynamics we talk about migration. Yeah? I don't want to say it's good or bad, it's just want to state that there are effects. Yeah? And this thing about irregular migration and asylum migration and this mixed up in discussion is one thing where we talk about the system of the thousands. Yeah, it's an internal talk and framing this thing. That's about the current system, the current protection system we have is part of the problem, perhaps part of the challenge. And we always, as I said, talk about the system of the thousands. So we have people in countries of origin who have thousands of kilometers they are walking. Yeah? They're paying thousands of dollars or euros to come to Europe, to the promised land where everything is there. There are jobs and flats and cars. Yeah? So if you try to put yourself in the position of these people there, yeah? And it's very easy for me personally. I've come from Styria to Vienna because of economic reasons. Yeah, it's a different thing. Yeah, if you come from Somalia, or you're in Somalia or in another African country or in the Middle East, and try to be. For me, it's been easy, but I can understand that someone goes anywhere else because of economic reasons. Yeah, and these pictures they have in our globalized world we are in, where everybody can see the whole world on this mobile phone, yeah, see pictures of the nice Western world, yeah, can be a thing which is very easy to abuse by criminals, yeah. So they use these pictures and they promise people with no perspectives in their or countries of origin, yeah, pay me some €1,000 and I bring you to Europe. Yeah, and so these people ending on some ships. Yeah, we know these pictures, and very often end that in the Mediterranean or in some rivers in the Evros, for example. And some of them in 2015 were on the European roads and go on and lead to the situation where we have where people in the European countries afterwards have some feeling of a loss of control. and lose of trust in the possibilities of their national state. So this situation in 2015, yeah, this situation, these pictures leaded us to think, to try to have a new approach. Just about the roots of migration, you already know. I think Mr. Körner talked about yesterday, I'm quite sure, about the migration routes are gone. So we need a new migration approach, and this new migration approach should be a new narrative we talk about migration, although because of the ongoing discussions we have in the European framework. You mentioned Dublin in your introduction, and we will see if there is a solution in the Dublin regulation within the Bulgarian presidency, but I think it's not very yeah, it's probably that there will be a solution. It will be some kind of a wonder, I think, and I think to looking forward to the Austrian presidency when we have this discussion, I think it would also be a wonder if we have a solution for this distribution key discussion. So we think we have to have a new narrative in this discussion and discuss the thing with a new eye on it. Yeah? So we have to discuss, we have consider the situations of the countries of origin more. Yeah? We have to focus more on the situation in transit states, and we have to bear in mind the situations, although have to have in mind the situations in the countries of destination, yeah? Where we, in our reflections about migration, say migration is something difficult. Yeah? There are a lot of different social topics affected by migration. It's the economy, it's the labor market, it's the health system. We have, when we talk about migration, we have to look at all these systems, and in the center of all the things is social peace in our perspective. Social peace and balance for a state are very essential. Yeah? And so if we talk about migration, yeah, and I want to add something you said in the end of your discussion, when you said perhaps the refugees are very welcome because they can pay our pensions. Yeah? Maybe, but it depends. It depends on the qualifications they have. Yeah? It depends if they are really fit for the labor market, if we need them, yeah, to find jobs here. Yeah? And one thing we are not have yet discussed when we talk about migration is, I think we have to link it with some other with another important discussion which is raising up. It's the discussion about digitalization. Yeah? Digitalization will have effects on our societies here. Yeah? It will have effects on our labor market. So, and these effects, yeah, will have effect on the needs of our systems here. Do we need, because of the demographic situation, do we need migrants come to Europe and do the jobs, and which migrants do we need? So just one short remark in this context. Yeah? So when we talk about have this new approach of migration, we should really distinguish between legal migration, asylum, and irregular migration. That's very important in our point of view. Then we need a whole of government approach when we talk about migration. What does that mean? That means that the relevant institutions on state level and also on European level have to bear in mind the migration issue. Yeah? For example, if the Minister of Economic Affairs in Austria goes to a country of origin, to a third country, he has to bear in mind the migration issue. That's very important, that this is a topic which affects so different other topics, so that's in our point of view very, very important to come to a solution and have a better migration policy at all. We must focus on the protection of our external borders, yeah? And I don't know if it's said yesterday, but we have to be honest. Yeah, we have to be honest. Till it's possible that one word opens the European frontiers. Yeah, and it doesn't matter how many people guard these European borders, and it doesn't matter how many ships are in the Mediterranean, and it doesn't matter if we build a Trump wall around Europe. Yeah? There is one word, just one word, which opens the door right now. And this word is called asylum. Yeah? If you say asylum at the European borders or on a European ship, you are in the European Union. And this thing is misused by criminals right now, because they are telling these people you saw previous on the photographs, don't worry, just go, we bring you to the border, we sit you in a ship, bring you to the Mediterranean, just go a few sea miles out, and then a European ship will come, and you just have to say asylum. Yeah? They don't say that's possible because the ships become, the quality of the ships worse and worse. Yeah? That's possible that they die in the Mediterranean. That's nothing they tell them in the propaganda, but it's true that the current system, the current protection system says that if you say that's a system of territorial asylum, which brings everybody who says at the frontiers or European ship asylum comes automatically to the European Union. What I don't want to say about with this is that there is no reason for asylum anymore. No, no, no. Asylum is very, very important. Yeah, but we have to reflect where we have to prove this asylum issue. Yeah, and we think it's necessary to start with these issues far away from the shores of Europe and start very early. Yeah, to start with perhaps mobile protection teams, yeah, in the countries of first reception. Yeah, when we're talking about asylum, and bring, if there is a reason for asylum, these people on a safe way to Europe and not within the hands of some criminals. And we have, when we're talking about protection, concentrate on the vulnerable ones. Yeah? The nowadays protection system is a very Darwinistic one. Yeah? It's a system where the strongest survive and come to Europe, and the ones who have enough money to come to Europe, not the ones who suffer at most, yeah? and have not the money to come to Europe. Yeah, okay, I know my time frame is. Yeah. So I go very fast through it, and this will be also our priorities for the upcoming presidency. So we have to concentrate on the protection of the European borders. Yeah, it's very important, this issue, and we have to. There is on this slide, you see the Frontex mandate needs to be extended and resources increased. Yeah, that's something the Austrian Chancellor already said. Yeah, to think about the extension of the Frontex mandate. But there are some discussions about it. But what we would what we wanted to do is to increase the capacities of Frontex. That's very important in our presidency. Then transit countries and countries of origin, we have to concentrate it with some policies on them. So it's related to return measures, yeah, readmission topics, and in the countries of origin and the first countries of receptions itself, we have to concentrate very much. We have to stabilize them. We have to do it on an economic way. We have to do it in a more logistic way. We have to raise information campaigns where we tell the people in those countries, don't believe in criminals. See, that's the legal ways to come to Europe. Then the other ways don't work. So that will be more or less our priorities here set up on this last slide. I have been very fast in my thing, but I think that's in the sense of it. Yeah. Yeah.
In this case, yeah. I want to now open up the discussion. I see myself three main issues. So the first one being the situation in countries of origin. So is it an illusion that by trying to make investment, that was the summit with the African states, that we can, of course, I think it might be a very positive, but I have personally the impression it's an illusion to think that investments can help to solve the problems when we are inviting business people to invest in a very unstable environment. And obviously that's linked to the second one, and there I would like to invite Bernd to come in also, the whole situation at the external borders. I mean, how to secure them, digitalization, Eurosur is another instrument, and certainly also connected to the third dimension, we are also invoking the assistance of third countries. You were also, Ilke was provoking us a little bit. We're externalizing our problem instead of solving our own problem. And that is also connected to the issue of relocation. So if this is a problem which is to be with us still for quite some time, Bernd, I referred to your statement yesterday, figures are declining. I have always the impression we are now in the midst of a second wave, but the third is upcoming. Climate, refugees, so it's with us for quite some time. And then we have to find final solutions for relocation and the legal migration. No, but the first one is it an illusion to think that by focusing on the countries of origin that we can already solve quite a lot of our own problems? Perhaps we can make a very quick round on that one, because I think the second one, external border protection, is perhaps the more important one. Ilke, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah. I would like to also underline first, I think this migration problem is a very ideological one. So your approach is either security or humanitarian, or how you perceive the problem, as I have already said in my talk, depends very much in your ideology. I think we should be all aware of this. The resettlement issue is the weakest part of Turkey-EU statement, because normally the deal was for all the returned migrants that there would be one-to-one legal resettlement in European Union territory. So basically this was the idea, that they will be returned, they will be discouraged to use the illegal means, so they wouldn't pay thousands of dollars or euros to human traffickers, but they would know that there is a real mechanism and it was one-to-one. It's not working. It's been 2 years. The numbers I have been showing you quickly because I had only 10 minutes, but the numbers are, I would say, embarrassing. And the idea here, where I connect all this question to European Union integration and the future of integration itself, is that we can't convince the member states to improve the conditions on this regard. So this is why I was saying we can work on all, I'm sure you will underline further this, on border control, on the management, on coast guards, etc., etc., but in another wave of migration, which could be from Africa because of climate migrations, for example, then the refugees this time can end up in Spain, for example, which would make the question way more closer where I live right now. And it will be the same argument, same decision, and the same problem of solidarity with a member state. Because what is going on with Greece right now could happen to any other Balkan member state or any other southern member states. So keeping all this in mind, I am sure this is very important to focus on border security guards, etc., etc. But at the same time, we should look for a way that how we can keep all the values that we have to claim, like starting with solidarity, and how we can find a way to solve this problem both inside and in the countries of origin.
Thank you. Thomas, and then I invite the audience also to come in.
Yeah. Is the thing, if we concentrate only on the countries of origin, yeah, it won't solve the problem at all. Yeah, but we have to do it nonetheless, yeah, it's in the puzzle. Yeah, it's very important to concentrate on them, yeah, and to work with them on an honest basis. Yeah, I think without them, we won't have a solution in the end. Yeah, so they are important, but not. It's not. It's one dimension of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Others in this respect, or shall we turn to perhaps Roderick from
Well, I would like to draw attention, perhaps I misunderstood you, but this is not I think it was said here, it has to be approached holistically. We cannot think only of the borders without thinking of internal policies and also some kind of responsibility sharing, which is the key, I think, to handling the crisis in the immediate future and in the long term. And then also move from there to the outside external borders, that is the transit countries and also the origin, the source countries. Now, the second point I would like to draw attention to, at least, is this, that no matter what policy we are going to apply, it's going to have the unintended consequences. This is one of the rules of politics. And the unintended consequences, for example, at the moment, we have secured some form of Libyan cooperation, which is very fragile, on keeping migrants in Libya. Not many, because they are still leaving from other places. They will move to other places, so that creates another problem. But internally, what is happening to the migrants who stay there is something very shocking, because they are being abused in big time. Why? Because the smugglers are in business. This is a business. And what they are doing is that if they can't get the money by ferrying them across the Mediterranean, they get it in other ways. So there is a lot. We think we solved our own problem, but we have created, and we must be aware of that. The third element, which is very important, I think, is resources. I mean, I question whether, but the gentleman here can answer better than me, whether Frontex or EASO, which has not been mentioned because we have to reform our asylum handling system, has enough resources. And we Europeans, are we ready to give these agencies the resources they need to work? Or are we going to the next budget and fighting about how low it should be? Not 1% of collective GNI now, it was 0.9%, and always going down for the lowest figure possible. Sorry.
So not in terms of finances only, but human capacity. Yeah, but it's about money. Okay, so I would like to turn to Funda and then to Beck. Yeah, Funda.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the two very interesting presentations. And I would rather address Ilke with regards to the Turkey deal, so to speak. And just because you kind of really pointed at the right problems and issues linked to that deal, and also, the concerns that most people have with that deal. But maybe also putting it a bit more into context, and then also from a German perspective, because I think the deal is also called the German deal or the Merkel deal. And I think that also played a role in terms of, well, you know, you had the internal problems with the QMV decisions. Of course, as Jaap said, that was something that was totally, in legal terms, totally a meaningful way to do. In political terms, I think it was not a wise decision to go for QMV in that, with these two decisions. But then it was also Germany who had, in previous years, always kind of not reacted to demands from France or Italy when they were calling for reforms of the Dublin regulation. So now that Germany was at the core of that crisis, Germany was not really in a position to demand any reforms or, you know, strong negotiating positions. So when I conducted some interviews on the German positions with regards to the to the deal, it was always, that was realpolitik. So, we could not find an internal solution. We had to go external. So I think that is what was one of the problems. And then also with regards to the job and the functioning of the deal, I think that is, relating to what you said with regards to the Turkish policy, that was the framing of the European Commission in terms of, it was a good thing because there were so many criticisms from the humanitarian sides, the legal sides and everything on that deal. So that was their way of framing that this deal was justified. My question now relates more to the broader EU-Turkey relationship, because I think that deal did not only had effect in migration terms, but on the broader EU-Turkey relationship. And there are two things. I think, first of all, the money side, and you pointed at it that Turkey is already kind of criticizing that you promised us something again, just like the membership perspective, and now you're not holding your promises. But I think the fundamental problem with that is that the Turkish side does not understand or does not want to understand or communicate it, that it's actually project funding. So, you do not get the funds right before, in the beginning, but it's really, we all know how project funding works. So you get a prepayment, and then you have to implement, and afterwards you get the final thing. But I think this is something, just, not a promise. And this is another thing, and this is then my question, the issue linkage with regards to that migration deal. The European Union not only promising the money, but also the revitalization of the accession negotiations and visa liberalization. And that has affected the EU-Turkey relations. And if you could elaborate on that a bit more.
Thank you. Thank you. So you have taken note. I would like to turn also to Bernd, because there are several references, and that allows me to jump to the second dimension. Also, to what extent we are doomed to consider this problem as a continuous problem, and again, declining numbers or not, second wave, third waves, climate refugees, and so on, and to what extent you think, from an expert perspective, we will be more able than we were so far to really secure control of the external borders in view of all the dimensions in the Mediterranean. Complicated to cover.
Thank you very much. Let me start by your quote, are we going to have a second, the third, and the fourth wave? I had some time ago a very interesting discussion with the Deputy High Commissioner Volker Türk, who said, I think we will have to close our ideas on being able to abolish migration. We will have to familiarize ourselves with the idea of being able to administer migration. Because even for me, it's already the second wave of migrants I'm personally experiencing. And let me briefly mention the first one in order to illustrate a little bit why the second one is not so different in substance. The first wave was at the beginning of the 90s, fall of the Iron Curtain, cross-border migration. We called it at that time, excuse me if somebody is present here out of those countries, amateur migration, going westwards, trying to find the land of milk and honey. And we returned them and they came back, and we returned them and they came back, and we returned them, and then they thought, okay, let's try the adjacent district, maybe I can make it through the adjacent district. Most of those countries today are member states of the European Union. That's what we, I think, once should really remember. What we today have in substance is nothing different, just at the bigger scale. I had the honor to meet high representatives of the government of Ghana a couple of weeks ago, and the Controller General mentioned to me, well, sir, don't we all live in one single globalized village? And I think he's not that wrong, because we all take advantage of low-cost carriers bringing us to holiday resorts, neglecting a little bit the fact that the cost for somebody going from the holiday resort to us is the same. So money is a completely different issue in today's terms, and overcoming long distances is not so much an issue anymore as it was maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. We were once, when evaluating the migration flows coming along the Eastern Mediterranean route, thinking, God, why do we have Moroccan nationalities coming in from Turkey, until we found the low-cost carrier going from Casablanca to Istanbul. So why should I invest the thousands of dollars or euros, Ilke and Thomas were talking about, if I can take a ticket by investing 39 euros or I don't know what, and take advantage of visa freedom and then go to the country and be almost there. So we need to look at migration in a bit of a different perspective. I made a couple of notes, and if you allow me, I will just briefly go through them. First one to you, Ilke. Full respect, of course, to your notions concerning the EU-Turkey statement, but let's please not forget the operative situation when the EU-Turkey statement was concluded. It was, I know it unfortunately by heart and will never forget it, was the 18th of March, because at the end, when it was concluded, we immediately had the video conference on how to implement it. And at that time, ladies and gentlemen, we had per day at the area around the island of Lesbos about an average 10,000 irregular migrants, refugees, whatever you call them. 10,000. And this was done on purpose. Because everybody knew that, let's say, we were present in the area with 10 vessels. So what they did was, let's get 40 vessels started, because the 10 vessels that are surveying the area will never be able to tackle all those 40. So let's deduct some that might not make it. Let's deduct some that might be apprehended. But at least on average between 20, 24, 30 will make it. And that was the practice. That's how we came up to the figure, and I'm now quoting from your statistics, the 988,000 arrivals. And the main issue was, or among the main issues at that time, was to curb the number of casualties that we had along the whole 5 islands that were then covered by the EU-Turkey statement. Of course, the original concept of this one-to-one, and here I'm fully with you, was completely different. If you take the history of the implementation of the EU-Turkey statement, you see that the first return was roughly 200, I think it was 210, and then it boiled down to 10, 5, 7, 8, maximum 20. Because the majority immediately reflected to what Thomas mentioned and go into the asylum system. Full right, nothing to comment, and not a single thing to comment on that, but since that time we have roughly about 16,000 people stuck on the 5 islands that are covered by the EU-Turkey statement, not moving in either direction, back or front. I don't want to comment on the clashes and the difficulties between different ethnicities we have in the camps, because this is a humanitarian tragedy. Now coming back to the question of hotspots, this ambivalence between humanitarian and security. I think, and I firmly believe, it has to be both. It has to be both, and the hotspot concept as a theoretical concept, I think, is one of the only solutions that we currently have. The pity was just that the hotspot concept in Italy and in Greece was built in existing situations. So it was not built in from scratch and then populated. It was built in existing situations in order to give some kind of structured flows or a structured meaning in an existing environment, which in some parts which were less affected worked, which in some parts which were more affected, Samos, Chios, and Moria, did not work in substance. Let's face it. We have to have a symbiosis between proper and clear and fully transparent humanitarian approach, but also security. And now I'm referring to the recommendations concerning interoperability. We have to be able to single out in a proper joint workflow the humanitarian cases, the vulnerable cases, the critical cases, the children, but also people who have either been here before or who can be found in any other database, who are trying to hide among irregular migrants in order to pursue completely different ideas. This would be a real hotspot concept, but unfortunately, in the existing system, we still have a bit to go there. Migration policy. I'm fully in favor of a proper migration policy, but also here I would like to make two different distinctions. The first one is we need solutions. We do not need the very valuable and very intensive and very interesting discussion about the migration policy. We have cases pending and we need solutions. In the middle of the 90s, if I'm not really mistaken, we already had once the possibility to apply for asylum at the embassies, which led to the result that the embassies at that time were flooded. From there, I somehow seem to remember the term of asylum shopping, because at that time, one even launched 3 asylum cases in order to find out at which place he was treated the fastest. Then the asylum application at the embassies was abolished, and the application for asylum was only made possible at places for destination. One could only say, probably clearly say, with this we paved the way for the business model of smuggling. Yes, but we need solution for that. Either or, we do not only need the discussion for that. And when we discuss on that, please, let's be fair and let's be frank. By discussing that, we are freezing open issues along the way. I noted down Western Balkans. It cannot be the solution that we build a fence between Greece and Macedonia, and we build a fence between Serbia and Hungary, and another member state already offers a fence in case migration at the parallel route will stop. Fences are not the solutions. And we cannot, at one side, ask accession candidate countries to approximate their national legislation to EU acquis and to international legislation. We need solutions in this field. We need solutions for countries that are first affected, and now I'm coming to border control. This is, in this case, Greece, Italy, but also Spain. And we need solidarity, and we need common work at those countries. It cannot be that we say, well, we know we have a problem there, but I cannot make anybody available because I need everybody at home. It's either or. If we cannot jointly work at the first points of entry, then the system will not work on the long run. And then, coming back for a brief moment, still to the question of Libya. Again, ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, we are talking about the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea always will need a certain level of third country cooperation. Otherwise, also as regards international cooperation, we will not manage to avoid casualties at the Mediterranean Sea. One guy, and I'm sorry for repeating this anecdote, one guy said, well, one of the solutions could just otherwise simply be, we empty the Mediterranean Sea, we take out the water, then we can build fences again. But as long as we have water, we need cooperation. In full respect of international humanitarian legislation, but we need this cooperation because otherwise we will again fail. And this cooperation might mean that in countries that do not live up to the standards, and I may repeat what I said yesterday, Libya is definitely a case. We need to invest and invest and invest, accept drawbacks and setbacks, because if we do not invest, if we just say we should stay out of it because it is maybe not appropriate, then either nothing will happen or others will come to go in. And we all know after the defeat in the current area, what are the suspicions where ISIL and Daesh might move now. So we might just transfer the problems might get worse and then come back later. Having said this, coming back to the agency, of course, by nature I have to be grateful if somebody says we should enhance the Frontex mandate and we should increase the resources. We will always take that, but let's please also be fair and frank. The number of the 10,000 that was mentioned, and this should go fast. Where do we have currently 10,000 border guards fully trained that are not working? This means that over a long multi-annual period, we would need to recruit, we would need to train, we would need to logistically get ready and deploy. Otherwise, this will again be a very nice discussion where everybody can say nothing but yes. But the practical outcome remains to be seen. Thank you very much.
While listening to you, I take it that you also consider this a problem which will stay with us for quite a while. Okay, I return now to the panelists, and then hopefully we will have the possibility to have a second round. So the questions of Funda, but take also the dimension third countries as such.
Okay.
And there may perhaps one dimension. I have sometimes stated that this, from the origin, is not a European problem. It has become a European problem because we're close and we are, from the perspective of country origin, a safe, stable area where to go easily to get to. Sometimes I have been wondering why we didn't earlier try to internationalize our efforts by invoking the assistance even before the Russians started to bombard Syria, to invoke the Russians or the Australians or the Canadians much more than we have done so far. I had always the impression that the Americans and the Canadians, they picked out the best educated and so forth, whereas I, from the start, do not consider it as a typically European problem. We have, in fact, created a problem for ourselves.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I think I will start with the safe country concept because ironically, as soon as Turkey was named safe country for the possibility, third safe country by Greece, for the possibility of returning immigrants, the coup attempt happened. Basically, in March, this statement has been signed, and in July, the coup attempt happened, and I was so lucky to be in Turkey in these days, and I was doing some field work with Syrian refugees, and you cannot imagine how scared they were. So basically, this third safe country concept sounds like a legal requirement so that we can return people back, but it is very important because in reality, all these people that are fleeing out of war, they mainly are looking for a bit more stable life afterwards. Not that this is a very long discussion that how stable Turkey is, how safe Turkey is, etc., etc. Turkey is safer than Syria. So the people are better in Turkey than Syria. Full stop. Then, since they don't have a refugee status, they are mostly looking for their own lives, so they are in the job market. Some of them, they have working permits right now, but still some of them are not legally registered, so they are in the black market, which is basically, if I can connect one more point, is the main source of discussion with the Turkish population or the Kurdish population in the areas they are living. If we are also interested in issues and problems of Syrians, this is also open to the discussion, it is not that easy for them to live in a country where they are not recognized as refugees, so they don't have housing aids and work permissions and the way to establish their lives for a stable life. But that's another discussion, I think, beyond the scope of this panel. Going through the questions of Funda, you are very right, Funda. This was also like the realpolitik, because like Merkel visited various times Turkey. They established a leaders summit in Brussels. They were like hugging each other. I still have the photo, Tusk hugging Davutoğlu, the prime minister at times. It's like my brother, you know, it's like with all even if regardless of the situation, the idea of transactional relationship should include some kind of political criteria. So this is why they wanted to establish the visa liberalization and revitalization of relations, leader summits, because it's also another part that Turkey wants to be in the picture with its European family. Because Turkey is it's also one of the problems of the country. It's always in search of family. Because even if it gets closer to Russia, it always knows that no, Russia, no. The approachment with the Western partners is a state policy, so it wants its place in the picture. So I personally am against the idea of adding political criteria to transactionality. It's the same idea with customs union now. That if modernization comes one day, it's going to be the same. But this is one other panel on Turkey relations that I will try to stop there. One thing that I would like to comment, going back to this humanitarian and security aspect, and I'm so glad that you said that fences are not solutions, but I was wondering, maybe you know more than me in this regard, that for the last 2 years that the EU-Turkey statement has been signed, what has been done in the humanitarian aspect? Because for the security aspect, we have some developments, no, that mostly related to old Frontex now, the Coast Guard institutions. But I would like to know, because this connects very much what we are discussing, are we getting prepared for the future? Or if there is an EU crisis in the future, we will be in the same situation because we didn't develop the system. This very much connects to the problems with decision-making in the European Union. This is not just migration policy. We have many issues with the euro itself, etc., other topics. But as long as we keep this rationality as the first principle, which I totally understand, like, we are not dreamers, we understand the realities of the European Union. But I would like to know that throughout all these years, we also improve in the humanitarian side of the story, basically. And what you have said about this Mediterranean Sea will always need third-party cooperation, I totally agree. This is a very important point. But so why don't we try to then establish or make it stronger, the already existing Mediterranean policy or European neighborhood policy? Because in the end, Europe goes through policy making. Now, why we are not investing further in cleaner deals? Not like when the crisis come, opportunistic, what we call realpolitik. We should invest in policies then, because Europe is where it is. It's always going to be where it is. So we need further policy making, and we should work on it. This is my point.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add on this point. My point of view, we have to face reality, and reality said the neighboring countries are like they are, yeah, and so we have to deal with the partners who are there, and we need solutions. That's the point. Yeah, of course, humanitarian aspects are necessary and are very important, and in all our measures we try to do in countries of origin or in transit countries. It's necessary for the European Union and its member states to point out this very important thing. Yeah? But in fact, yeah, if we won't have a situation like 2015 again, yeah, we need some deals with them, and that's in some situations often very fast, and then it's realpolitik what's coming out. So that's just the reality. Yeah? One thing to the Frontex mandate you said, and to the extension, I fully agree with you. Yeah, it's clear what's our ambition in this way is just to raise the discussion. Yeah, just to talk about it, and we on the practical level. Yeah, we of course know the problems. Yeah, we schaffen das. Yeah. Yeah, but it's in our point of view, it's important to raise this issue and to talk about it. Yeah, and also about EASO. Yeah, you said it's the same thing, more or less. So that's my point of view. Yeah.
So I mean, it's to make sure that the discussion goes a bit from the one problem to the other. Are there other comments to be made from the audience? Because we didn't touch upon even the relocation. We got stuck a bit in the countries of origin, in the external borders. Peter.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the last sentence. I exactly wanted to talk about that, about the internal functioning in the EU. And of course, I come from the Czech Republic, so I'm probably the only Czech who is in favor of the quota relocation system. I'm exaggerating a bit, but not much, I have to say, frankly. And it seems to me that for the system to work internally, now I'm not talking about the normative ideal, but about the practical situation in the Visegrad 4 countries. We need, and that's why I really like the comment on framing, we really need to come up with a new framing of the issue. Because at the moment, what we have arrived at is a sort of qualified majority voting decision, which unfortunately only strengthens the vicious circle of the local perceptions that everything is imposed. It's imposed externally, and they send the refugees there. Of course, the population, well, not of course, but the population, unfortunately, is rather hostile, and the result is that the refugees then almost immediately leave for Germany, typically, and that only further serves to reinforce the argument of the opponents of the quotas, because they say, look, they don't work. They don't work because they never stay. Anyway, so there is this kind of course, there are socio-economic reasons for that. There are family relations in Germany and so on. But I'm sure that the starting point is that we somehow have to, and of course it's a task for the local media, local policymakers to convince the populations, and that is not happening. The attitudes are becoming more and more hostile. One opinion poll after another. You know, I always think that it cannot go any higher, but still, you know, at the moment it's like 85% of the people across the region against accepting any refugees. You know, so the numbers are horrific. And what I also want to say is that I believe that the punitive measures do not work. You know, like the idea which is floating around about, you know, connecting the immigration, which I find quite interesting on the one hand, of connecting the acceptance of the refugee quota system with the EU funds that are sent to the countries. There was an opinion poll just, I think, last month on that, and quite substantial parts of the populations in Central Europe were against accepting refugees, even if the countries lose EU funds. I mean, I was really surprised because I didn't see that coming, but that's there. And my final point is on the framing and on the issue of how to frame that. And I really think that what I think is dangerous is framing in utilitarian terms. So something like saying, we need them because they will pay our pensions, or we need them exactly the point you made, or we need them because of the labor market. I mean, the Czech Republic has the lowest unemployment across the EU. It's like 3.2% or something like that. So theoretically, this argument should work really well in the Czech Republic, right? Because we really need, and the labor market is desperately searching for labor force, but it does not.
Thank you. With regard to your second point, I can add immediately, so we received in the Netherlands quite a number of Syrians. For the moment, 85% of them are completely dependent on social security. So I think it's an illusion, perhaps at the long run. First point, perhaps you forgot a little bit, the refugees, migrants are not even tempted to go to Central Europe because they know they are not welcome. And sometimes you have the impression, although it's true what you say about not imposing, perhaps by playing on emotions, national politicians have also a responsibility. Okay. We are allowed to take in perhaps one or two comments, and then I return to our panelists, and then we have to bring it to a close, unfortunately. Other questions, comments? No? Then I return to Ilke and Thomas, perhaps Bernd, and then we close the session.
Thank you very much for the comments. I think we all agree on the necessity for looking for a better framing. Mine was just an example. We should look for a better one for sure. But the thing is, we should also accept that the refugee community requires a couple of years of adjustment. No, we can't accept anyone to come and directly find a job. Even like when you move to another European country, you might take a while to look and find a job. So that's definitely there. But my problem of framing goes a bit beyond that, because the thing is, for example, the Hungarian government is doing. It's also in some sense Czech government is doing. Like even if there are no refugees whatsoever there, using this, I even heard in a meeting on refugees in Hungary saying that, like, we stopped the Ottomans, now we will stop the Syrians. Really, literally, I heard this and I was like, I can't believe this. So this is what I meant with framing. Like it's if you frame this in an identitarian way or a cultural way, even if you don't have the reality of refugees, you are creating a reaction anyway. Exactly, exactly. And what I was thinking, just to be a bit manipulative in my last sentences in this panel, like, again, Turkey has lots of problems, but it's a country of 80 million and it's hosting almost 4 million. European Union is a unity of 500 million people and cannot host 5 million, cannot host 10 million. I know that when I say this, it sounds like, wow, no way, we can't handle the public opinion, we can't do this. I know this is the feeling. But if you think in that way, in that terms, maybe we should try a bit harder. But in any case, my final remark on this is not that how much we can try and how many people we can accommodate. The thing I'm saying is that we should look for effective policies and proactive foreign policy in country of origin so that these problems, they don't turn out again against us. It's the same, for example, with climate change in African countries right now. Like, we know that is going to come at some point. What is the policy? Again, the Mediterranean. We know we need to collaborate. What is the policy solutions we offer? Then I will pass the microphone and my co-panelists will say, we need solutions, not smart discussions. Thank you.
The panelist first will say he prefers to talk about migrants and not about refugees in forward. Refugees, so we don't know if all these people are refugees, yeah? And if we talk about the capacities of Turkey, which is very respectful what they are doing, also we can talk about Jordan, what's very respectful what they are doing, yeah? Of course, it's not really fair to talk about the European Union as a national state. There are 27 different national states with different capacities and also very well established, in some ways, very well established social systems and social cohesion and ways that's very different to other countries in this world. So I think in the discussion you have to mention this and keep it in mind. One thing, the one question was what I fully agree. One problem is with resettlement or relocation, doesn't matter. If someone comes to perhaps one state, like I said, anything with Czech Republic or it's Romania or it's Poland, perhaps they don't want to stay there, they just want to go to Germany, Sweden or Austria. So that's still the problem we have within this discussion. So coming back to one question you raised earlier, I forgot to go on this. Will there be a third wave of migration crisis? I said yes, when we don't change the system and talk about in another way. So that's the thing. Thank you.
Two short remarks from my side. Thank you very much. Crisis management. Point taken. Allow me that I answered only from the perspective of our agency. We are fully aware of that, and with the migration crisis, we have reached a new dimension in border checks or border management that we simply didn't have before. We were used to check a plane, a vessel, a car, a bus, or maybe 10 buses or 100 buses, but then it was over for the weekend again. This continuous flow that we had never was in place before. So what we need is somehow, and I'm now quoting, a symbiosis between the IOM concept of humanitarian border management with all its elements and security and all of that. This is under development, and we are working in this respect closely together with EU institutions and our sister agency, EASO. It is already as an indicator in the vulnerability assessment that we talked about yesterday, so we are regularly also now checking the readiness of the different member states, and we are also making recommendations on this field. So there is something at least kicked off, but still to be improved. Closing statement from my side, third country cooperation. Please, let's not forget, we have at large talked about the flows and the results, but I have listed here a couple of countries which somehow show that we have to work also on something else. The Syrian flows come from somewhere. And if we do not manage to solve Syria, those flows will not stop. We have had a series of countries where large ethnicities have been residing legally, and the residence permits of those third country nationals in those third countries have been terminated, and they have been given the chance to either go home or move on. And several of the ethnicities that we are currently working on in the case of irregular migration flows are those ethnicities. So there are also some other responsibilities that need to be mentioned. Afghanistan, the same thing goes for Syria, and visa obligation, I just mentioned as a closing one, Iran in Belgrade. If we still have a bit of a strange compromise between economy and migration, meaning opening new flows in there, then we also have to bear the consequences. Thank you.
I lost already my microphone, so I'm forced to close the session. Nevertheless, two main principles which are coming to us, whatever discussion we have. Stability, it's our interest to work on stability in the neighborhood. I mean, in this respect, we can connect all the panel sessions to it. It's our policy making and so forth, investments. We have the internal dimension to apply more the solidarity kind of principle, which is very important. And perhaps we can even provoke you to assist in another manner, the alternative methods of implementing. But in the midst is the problem of the external border, and there essentially, I'm afraid, it's about human capacity, it's about money. It's about the multi-annual financial framework, which was dealt with in the other panel. So to that extent, everything is, but it's essentially your problem, I think. You want to have your 10,000 labor force, it's a financial problem. So to that's the message we have to bring to the political level, I think. So we have not solved all the problems, but nevertheless, perhaps developed some interesting, new, creative insight. Thank you so much, Ilke. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you so much. Any audience.